There is this deeply romanticized idea about what a writer's life looks like. We tend to picture the starving artist,
Mm.
shivering in a garret somewhere in Paris, right? Drinking cheap wine, waiting for the lightning bolt of inspiration to strike.
It's a nice image. It's very poetic.
It is poetic,
It's also usually complete nonsense.
right? Because today, we are looking at a source that takes a sledgehammer to that entire mythology. We are diving into a stack of materials, memoirs, writing guides, essays from a guy who didn't write his breakout bestseller in a garret.
Not all.
He wrote it while working a grueling full-time job as a practicing attorney.
And not just any bestseller. We are talking about the specific book that proved mathematically, commercially, and culturally that epic fantasy could be a massive industry. I mean, before this guy, publishers thought Lord of the Rings was a fluke.
A total one-off.
Exactly. After him, we got the modern fantasy boom.
We are talking, of course, about Terry Brooks and his book, Sometimes the Magic Works, Lessons from a Writing Life. And here is the mission for this deep dive. We aren't just going to geek out on elves and magic swords.
Although there will be some of that.
Of course. But even if you have never read a fantasy novel in your life, you need to stick around. Because this is a masterclass in resilience. It's about the brutal reality of the creative industry, the nightmare of Hollywood bureaucracy, and mostly, it's about how to keep your imagination alive in a world that is constantly trying to crush it.
It's a fascinating document because it's a hybrid. It's part autobiography, part how-to manual, and part philosophical treatise. I mean, Brooks isn't just telling war stories. He's trying to explain the magic of how you pull something out of thin air and make it real.
And he starts that explanation with a confession that I think a lot of people will relate to, even if they aren't writers. He opens the book by admitting, point blank, I am not all here.
It is a striking way to introduce yourself. I am not all here. And he's describing a phenomenon that, really, it defines his entire existence. He takes us back to when he was a kid, sitting in church.
I love this scene. It's so vivid.
It is. Picture it. He's stuck in the pew between his grandmother Gleason and his Aunt Blanche. It's hot, the sermon is dragging on, and he's bored out of his mind.
We've all been there.
Absolutely. And suddenly he hears them whispering loudly, the way relatives do when they think they're being subtle. They're gossiping about a woman sitting a few rows ahead of them.
They're debating who she is, where she came from.
Right. And finally, one of them leans over and delivers the verdict. She says, she wasn't all here. Everybody said so. And for young Terry Brooks, that was the lightning bolt.
That's the moment.
He shrank down in the pew because he realized, oh my God, that's me. I'm not all here either.
But he doesn't mean he's crazy.
Yeah.
Or maybe he does, in a way.
Well, he means it literally. He's describing the condition of living in two worlds simultaneously. There is the real world. The world where you have to pay taxes, go to the grocery store, sit in church, practice law.
The mundane world.
And then there is the imaginary world inside your head, which is often much more vibrant, much more real to him. Brooks admits that he spends most of his life with one foot in each.
He talks about the cost of that, too. It's not just some fun quirk.
No, it has consequences.
He mentions his wife, Judine, reading him an article from the newspaper over breakfast. He nods, he says, he drinks his coffee.
He's physically present.
Exactly. But 5 minutes later, he picks up the exact same paper and starts reading the exact same article aloud to her, thinking he's sharing news.
Because he wasn't there. He wasn't listening. Physically, he was at the table, but mentally, he was in the four lands. He was fighting a demon or fixing a plot hole. And, it can be incredibly frustrating for the people around him, but Brooks argues it's necessary.
Right, it's a job requirement.
It is. He cites this concept from the mystery writer Walter Mosley called gathering smoke.
Gathering smoke.
Oh.
That is such a cool phrase. What does it actually entail?
Think about where ideas come from.
But
they don't usually arrive fully formed, like a package on your doorstep.
No.
They come as wisps, a snippet of conversation you overhear on the bus, the way the light hits a building, a weird dream you had. Mosley and Brooks argue that a writer's job is to constantly be gathering these little wisps of smoke from the ether. You have to be tuned in to that frequency.
So if you are all here, if you are 100% focused on your taxes and your grocery list and being a present, attentive adult,
you miss the smoke.
You miss it.
Exactly. The smoke dissipates. You have to be partially absent from the real world to be present in the creative one. Brooks says the muse whispers when she chooses, not when you choose.
Right.
So if she whispers while you're in the middle of a conversation with your spouse, you have a choice.
Yeah.
You can be a good spouse, or you can listen to the muse. Brooks admits he often chooses the muse.
Which brings us to the irony of his early life. Because here is a guy whose brain is fundamentally wired to gather smoke and live in fantasy worlds. And he decides to become a lawyer.
Talk about a profession that demands you be all here, 110%.
Right. You can't really zone out during a deposition.
You cannot. And yet, that tension is where his career was born. He didn't quit his job to write. He wrote The Sword of Shannara, which is a massive, complex epic in the margins of his life.
In his spare time.
He wrote at night, he wrote on weekends, he wrote while the rest of the world was asleep. But the really interesting part of this origin story isn't just the writing, it's the business side. And for that, we have to talk about Lester Del Rey.
Oh, Lester. Based on the source material, this guy sounds like a character that Brooks would have invented if he didn't already exist.
He really does. Lester Del Rey was this legendary, curmudgeonly editor. He was short, loud, and incredibly confident. He had a business card that didn't list a job title.
I love this detail.
It just said, Lester Del Rey, expert.
That is a power move. I am going to get new business cards made.
Most expert. Has a ring to it. But Lester had the track record to back it up. Now, to understand why Lester matters, you have to understand the landscape of 1974. Today, we take fantasy for granted.
Completely.
You walk into a bookstore, there are rows of it. Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Wheel of Time.
It's practically the dominant genre of pop culture now.
But in 1974, it was a dead zone. The publishing industry had a hard rule. Fantasy does not sell.
But what about Tolkien? I mean, Lord of the Rings was huge in the 60s.
That was the problem. Publishers viewed Tolkien as a unicorn, a total anomaly. They thought Lord of the Rings was a singular freak event, not a genre. They believed adult readers had zero interest in magic or elves unless it was written by an Oxford professor.
So it was a club of one.
Exactly. So if you submitted a fantasy manuscript in 1974, it went straight into the trash.
So Brooks sends his manuscript, this massive epic fantasy, into a market that is actively hostile to it.
Well, he sends it to Dell Books first. They reject it. But the editor there says, you know who might like this? Judy Lynn Del Rey at Ballantine. So Brooks sends it to her. She passes it to her husband, Lester. And this is where luck meets strategy. Because Lester Del Rey had a theory.
The guinea pig theory.
Nicely. Lester believed the other publishers were idiots. He was absolutely convinced there was a massive, hungry audience for fantasy that was being starved. He wanted to prove that fantasy was a viable commercial category, but to do that, he needed a test subject.
He needed a proof of concept.
He needed a guinea pig.
And Terry Brooks was that guinea pig.
He was. Lester decided to launch a new imprint, Del Rey Books, and he made The Sword of Shannara the flagship title, the centerpiece. He put everything behind it. But it wasn't a charity case.
Oh, no. Lester was brutal.
So what did he do?
He sent Brooks a letter saying, this is potentially the best epic fantasy since Tolkien, which is the carrot.
The best thing you'd possibly hear.
The absolute best. And then came the stick.
Which was 10 pages of single-spaced notes detailing everything that was wrong with it. Fix the pacing. This character is weak. Change the ending. I mean, it was a teardown.
Wow.
Brooks spent a year rewriting it based on Lester's demands.
And the experiment worked.
It broke the industry. In 1977, The Sword of Shannara became the first work of fiction to ever appear on the New York Times trade paperback bestseller list.
The very first.
The first one. It sat there for 5 months. It proved Lester was right. It opened the floodgates. Every fantasy author working today owes a little debt to that specific moment.
But there's a shadow side to this, isn't there? I mean, because the book was marketed so aggressively as the next Tolkien, the critics absolutely destroyed Brooks.
Oh, they savaged him. They were merciless. They called it a ripoff. They called it derivative. And Brooks took that hard. He felt like he'd been used to prove Lester's point, and now he was the one taking the bullets.
It felt like a fraud.
For sure. He struggled with that imposter syndrome for a long, long time.
So how did he reconcile it? Because that's a tough way to start a career massive commercial success paired with critical disdain.
He eventually came to a place of what he calls radical acceptance. He calls it luck, with a capital L. He admits that if he had finished the book 6 months earlier or 6 months later, Lester might not have been looking for a guinea pig.
The timing was everything.
The timing was everything. He might never have been published. So he decided that sometimes the magic works, and when it does, you don't question the recipe. You just say thank you and move on.
I like that. But here's the thing about magic. Sometimes it stops working. And frankly, the most instructive part of this deep dive isn't the success of Sword. It's the disaster that happened immediately after.
The failed sequel. This is a story Brooks tells to young writers, and it usually terrifies them.
So he's riding high, he's on the bestseller list,
Yeah.
money rolling in. The publisher says, give us another one.
Naturally, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So Brooks sits down and writes a book called The Song of Lorelei.
Which, for the record, I have never heard of.
Yeah.
And I've read a lot of his books.
No one has. It doesn't exist. But Brooks spent nearly a year on it. He wrote about 375 pages. He was struggling with the ending, but he felt pretty good about it. He bundled it up and sent it to Lester, expecting, a few minor tweaks. He was the golden boy, after all.
And Lester's response was not golden.
It was nuclear. Lester sent a letter back saying, essentially, this is garbage. It is a mess. It is unsalvageable. You need to scrap it.
Imagine the whiplash. I mean, you go from New York Times bestseller to this is garbage in one envelope.
Brooks was devastated, completely. He talks about going through the literal stages of grief. Denial. Lester is old, he's lost his touch.
Right, he doesn't get it.
Anger. How dare he talk to me like that? Then depression. I'm a hack. I got lucky once, and now it's over. He just sulked around the house for days.
What snapped him out of it?
Judy Lindell Ray, Lester's wife, she called him and gave him some tough love. She said, look, Lester is sending the manuscript back to you. He put notes in it. Just read the notes before you do anything stupid.
And when the manuscript arrived...
It was covered in yellow slips of paper.
I don't know.
Everywhere. Every few pages, a yellow note. And here is the crucial moment for Brooks as an artist. He sat down, determined to read the notes just so he could argue with them. He wanted to prove Lester wrong.
He was ready for a fight.
He was. But as he read note after note, the anger just drained away. He realized Lester was pointing out massive plot holes, inconsistent character motivations, dead ends, all the things he'd been struggling with but couldn't see.
You realized the expert was right.
He realized the book was broken, fundamentally broken. And he did the hardest thing a writer can do.
He threw it away.
He threw it away. 375 pages, a year of work, into the trash.
That is painful to even think about.
It is, but he started over from scratch.
Yeah.
And wrote The Elfstones of Shannara instead. And most fans and critics agree that Elfstones is a significantly better book than Sword. It's tighter, it's more emotional. It really defined his career.
So the failure was the key.
Brooks says that failure taught him more than the success ever did. It taught him that you have to be willing to kill your work if it's not true. You can't just coast on a previous win.
That disaster led him to develop a very specific process, which he calls the secret sauce. And it brings us to a topic that divides the writing world right down the middle. The dreaded O word.
Outlining.
It seems like such a boring administrative task, but writers get really heated about this. You have the pantsers, fly by the seat of your pants like Stephen King, who say outlining kills the magic.
They call them discovery writers.
Right. And then you have the plotters like Brooks.
Brooks is militant about outlining. His formula is simple. Read, read, read. Outline, outline, outline. Write, write, write. He will not start a book until he knows exactly where it is going, from beginning to end.
Why is he so opposed to the Stephen King method? I mean, why not just let the characters surprise you? That sounds more fun.
Because of the Song of Lorelei, that's why. He never wants to walk 400 pages in the wrong direction again. He views the outline as a map. He says if you are crossing a dangerous jungle, do you want to wander around hoping you find the exit, or do you want a map?
That's a good point. But doesn't that make the writing boring? If you know exactly what's going to happen in chapter 20 before you even write chapter 1, where's the fun? Where's the discovery?
That's the most common critique, but Brooks flips it. He argues that the outline actually liberates you. Think about it. If you are stressing about, wait, does he turn left or right here? Does he find the sword now or later? Call. Your brain is occupied with logistics.
You're doing traffic control.
Exactly, you're a project manager. But if the traffic control is done, if the outline handles the plot, then your brain is free to focus on the art. You can focus on the sensory details, the rhythm of the dialogue, the emotional nuance of a scene. You can focus on how to tell the story because you already know what the story is.
That makes sense. It's like having the blueprints for a house. Lets the interior designer do their best work.
Perfect analogy. And he calls the period before the outline dream time.
Dream time.
Yes. This goes back to Gathering Smoke. He spends months just thinking. He drives around listening to classical music. He specifies classical because lyrics distract him. And he visualizes the movie in his head, scene by scene. He won't write a single word until the movie is finished in his mind.
So the outline is just him writing down the movie he's already watched.
Pretty much. And he has strict rules for what can even go into the outline. First, Nothing goes in unless it's grounded in some truth about the human condition.
Even in a fantasy world with elves.
Especially then. It has to be about love or loss or courage. And second, everything must advance the story. No matter how cute an idea is, if it doesn't move the plot, it goes.
He gives a really concrete example of how this attention to detail works in the actual prose. I want to dig into the Maud Manx example because this is where the advice gets really actionable for anyone listening.
This is great. He creates a hypothetical thriller called Cat Chaser. The protagonist is Maud Manx.
What a name.
She's an 80-year-old, one-armed ex-CIA agent living in a cabin with her cats.
I would read this book, by the way. I'm already in.
I would too, 100%. But he uses Maud to demonstrate the show don't tell rule. He gives us two versions of her introduction. The first is what he calls the grocery list.
I have the text here. It goes something like, Maud was 80 years old. She had lost an arm in the line of duty. She used to work for the CIA. She lived alone with her cats.
It's terrible. It's dry. It's just data. It's a police report. It tells you facts, but it makes you feel nothing.
It's boring.
It's very boring. Then he rewrites it using his method.
Okay.
Right. So in the second version, he doesn't tell you she's 80. He describes her waking up and feeling the stiffness in her joints, the ache of the damp weather. He doesn't tell you she has one arm. He describes her cradling a cat in her good arm and glancing at the pinned-up sleeve of her shirt.
Ah, so you see it.
You see it.
Well,
And he describes her scanning the perimeter of the yard, not because she's paranoid, but because she's trained. It's an ingrained habit.
the difference is night and day. In the second version, you aren't just learning about Maud. You are inhabiting Maud. You're in her head.
That's the magic. And he links this to another rule, character purpose. He says characters are actors auditioning for a role. If they don't have a crucial job, they don't get cast.
He uses the paperboy example. Johnny Gazette.
Johnny Gazette, I love that. If Johnny just throws the paper and waves, he's gone. He's cut from the outline. He serves no purpose.
He's just set dressing.
Right. But if Johnny throws the paper and notices a black van parked across the street that hasn't been there before, now Johnny has a job. Now Johnny is advancing the plot. Now he gets to stay. Brooks is ruthless about this. He calls unnecessary characters annoying phone solicitors. You just hang up on them.
I want to pivot to the question every creative person hates, but Brooks actually answers beautifully. Where do you get your ideas?
He plays the what-if game.
Yeah.
He says ideas aren't things you find in a catalog. They are questions you ask.
The story behind Running with the Demon is a perfect example of this. It's a fantasy book, a dark fantasy, but it started with something incredibly mundane.
Road rage.
Just road rage.
He was driving in Seattle, and some guy cut him off and screamed at him. It was a small, ugly moment, but Brooks couldn't shake it. He started thinking about how angry everyone seemed, how civility was breaking down.
So the what if was,
He asked, what if this isn't accidental? What if we aren't just grumpy? What if there's a literal supernatural force feeding on this anger?
oh, that's chilling.
What if demons are invisible, whispering in our ears, urging us to be selfish and cruel? And suddenly that road rage incident isn't just traffic. It's the opening scene of a massive hidden battle between good and evil.
That's terrifying, but it makes so much sense as a story engine. And then you have the story of Magic Kingdom for Sale Sold. This one is unique because he didn't just find the idea, he sort of stole it.
Borrowed it. From Lester, of course.
Of course.
Brooks was burned out on Shannara. He was tired of epic quests. He went to Lester and said, I need a break. I want to write something different, maybe something funny. And Lester said, well, I have this idea, but it's not for you.
The classic reverse psychology.
It worked like a charm. Lester said, a man sees an ad in a Christmas catalog, Magic Kingdom for sale, $1 million, and he buys it. Lester thought it should be a comedy, a farce.
But Brooks took it in a different direction.
He took the idea on loan. Lester gave him 1 year to write it or give it back. As Brooks started gathering smoke on this idea, he realized the protagonist, Ben Holliday, wasn't a clown. He was a tragic figure. Ben was a successful lawyer who had lost his wife and was just completely disillusioned with his career.
Which is exactly where Brooks was at that moment in his life.
Exactly. Brooks was a lawyer. He was feeling trapped by the profession. He was desperate for a door into a magical world where he could be someone else. He poured all of his own midlife crisis and grief into Ben Holliday.
So it became personal.
Deeply personal. And that's why the book works. It's not just a funny premise. It's an emotional autobiography. And writing that book gave him the courage to finally quit his law practice and write full-time.
That transition from lawyer to full-time writer leads us into the biggest conflict in the book. the collision between the solitary, controlled world of the novelist and the chaotic, committee-driven world of Hollywood. Brooks tells a tale of two cities here, the nightmare and the dream.
We have to start with The Nightmare, Hook.
The Steven Spielberg movie from the 90s.
Right. Brooks was hired to write the novelization. Now, you have to keep in mind, Brooks identifies deeply with Peter Pan. He sees himself as the boy who never grew up, so he was thrilled. He thought, I'm going to work with Spielberg, this is going to be amazing.
But his editor friend warned him.
He did. His friend Owen Locke said, Terry, moody people are not like us, don't do it. Brooks ignored him, thinking, how bad can it be?
Famous last words.
And it was a disaster from the moment he landed in Los Angeles.
Break it down for us. What made it so bad?
It was a combination of two things: the total lack of access and the absolute chaos of the script. Brooks expected to sit down with Spielberg, maybe talk to Robin Williams or Dustin Hoffman, get a feel for the characters. Instead, he was quarantined. They put him in a trailer. They let him visit one tiny corner of the set for 20 minutes and forbade him from taking photos. He was treated like a spy, not a creative partner.
And the script was a moving target.
Moving target is an understatement. It was hallucinating. Brooks would get pages of the script to adapt. He'd write a scene, say, a baseball game set in New York in the winter. He'd send it in. The next day, he'd get a memo. The baseball game is now in Denver, and it's spring.
Oh, God.
So he'd rewrite it. Then the next day, it's not a baseball game anymore. It's a Christmas pageant. Then a day later, we cut the scene entirely. He was chasing a ghost. He was trying to write a novel based on a movie that didn't exist yet.
And the editorial process on top of that.
Even worse. When he finally turned in the manuscript, the studio sent it to 3 different editors. They all sent notes back to Brooks, but they clearly hadn't talked to each other. One editor would say, this scene needs to be darker, more scary. Another editor would comment on the same scene, this is too dark, make it funny.
So they were contradicting each other.
Constantly. One editor told him to remove references to Disney characters in a book about Peter Pan.
It sounds like gaslighting.
It was bureaucratic insanity. Brooks finished the book, took the check, and swore he would never, ever work with Hollywood again.
But then, the phone rang. And it was George Lucas.
You don't say no to George Lucas, especially not in the mid-90s when he's making The Phantom Menace.
Right.
This was the most anticipated movie of the decade.
But Brooks hesitated after the Hook experience.
He did. He was still traumatized. He basically said thanks, but no thanks at first. But they were persistent, so he flew to Skywalker Ranch, and the vibe was instantly different.
How so?
He met George Lucas, and they started talking about storytelling. Not about business, but about myth and character. And they had this realization, wait, we write the same story.
What do they have in common? One is spaceships, one is elves.
But look deeper. They're both generational sagas. They're about dysfunctional families dealing with the sins of the fathers. They're about ordinary farm boys thrust into galactic or kingdom-wide conflicts. Shannara and Star Wars share the same mythological DNA. They spoke the same language.
And Lucas treated him differently than the Hook producers did.
Totally. Lucas gave him the keys to the kingdom. He opened the vault. Brooks saw the concept art, the lore, the scripts. But the real game changer was what Brooks calls the flashback argument.
Tell us about that.
So Brooks read the script for episode 1, and he felt that Anakin Skywalker's backstory was too thin. We needed to see him before the movie started to really understand who he was and why he made the choices he made. Brooks wanted to write original chapters, stuff not in the movie.
That is bold. Asking George Lucas if you can add scenes to Star Wars.
It gets bolder. Brooks hated the way Lucas used flashbacks in the script. He told George, this doesn't work in a book. It's confusing for the reader. I want to unspool the story chronologically. I want to start with Anakin on Tatooine as a little boy before the Jedi even arrive.
He told the creator of Star Wars that his narrative structure was wrong.
He did, politely but firmly. And because Lucas respected him as a peer, as a fellow world builder, Lucas said, okay, try it. That is the difference between being a hired hand and being a collaborator.
And it worked.
Brooks wrote those original chapters, and for many fans, the novelization of The Phantom Menace is actually deeper and richer than the movie because of it. It restored Brooks's faith in the process.
That story really highlights the tension between art and commerce, which is a recurring theme in the book. Brooks is very pragmatic, but he also has lines he won't cross.
He understands that publishing is a business. He gets it. He knows that if you write a bestseller about elves, the publisher wants another book about elves. It's the golden goose problem.
But Brooks got tired of elves. After a while, he wanted to write The Word and the Void.
Right, the dark contemporary fantasy we mentioned earlier. No elves, no swords, just demons in a park in Illinois. He knew his fans might not follow him there. He knew the publisher was nervous.
But he did it anyway.
He did, because the story demanded it. And the result was mixed, artistically. He considers them some of his best books. They are dark, complex, and mature. Commercially, they sold about half as well as a Shannara book.
That has to sting. To do what you feel is your best work and have the market say, meh, we want the other stuff.
It does. But Brooks calls this learning to live with unrealized expectations. He says you have to make a choice. Do you want to be a content machine churning out what the market demands, or do you want to be an artist and follow your vision? If you choose the artist path, you have to accept that not every experiment will be a blockbuster. You have to be okay with that trade-off.
He shares a story about humility that I think sums this up perfectly. The book signing story.
Oh, this is painful and hilarious. It was his very first book signing for Sword of Shannara. He's a nobody. He's sitting at a table next to A.J. Budrys, who was a well-known sci-fi author at the time.
Yeah.
They are sitting there for hours. No one comes. It's just crickets.
The classic lonely author at a table. Nightmare.
The absolute nightmare. Finally, a young girl walks up. She picks up the Sword of Shannara. A.J. Budrys, trying to be a good wingman, jumps in. He says, you should buy that. It's going to be a classic. He's a great writer.
So he's really selling it.
He's trying his best. And the girl looks at Brooks.
Yeah.
She looks at him and asks, have you written anything else? Brooks smiles and says, no, this is my first one. She looks at the book, looks back at him, puts the book down on the table, and just walks away.
Ouch.
Crushed. Absolutely crushed. But Brooks says that moment was a gift. It killed his ego before it could grow. He realized that book signings aren't about him being a celebrity. They are about one reader connecting with one story.
It's not about the author.
Not at all. He decided right then that he would never be the arrogant author. He would be kind to everyone, even the people who put the book back. He realized that success is about connection, not worship.
That brings us to the final, and I think the most touching part of the deep dive. The world according to Hunter.
Hunter is his grandson, and this section is the heart of the book because it brings us back to the beginning, back to the not all here kid in the church.
Brooks watches Hunter play, and he realizes that kids are the ultimate writers. They are the masters of imagination.
He tells this story about building a zoo with Hunter. They have these plastic animals and blocks, and Hunter takes the lions and puts them in the same pen as the zebras.
And Brooks, being the logical adult, the world builder with all his rules, interrupts. He says, Hunter, you can't do that. The lions will eat the zebras. You have to separate them.
He's applying the rules of the real world. He's being all here. He's forgotten how to play. And Hunter looks at him, completely confused by this adult nonsense, and says, Papa, we're pretending.
It's such a simple rebuke. We're pretending.
It shattered Brooks. He realized that as we get older, we build fences in our minds. We say, that's not logical, or that's not how the market works, or that's not realistic. We kill the magic with logic.
We self-edit before the idea is even born.
Exactly. But the writer's job is to be Hunter. The writer's job is to put the lion with the zebra and ask, what if they didn't eat each other? What if they became allies? That is where stories come from. You have to tear down the fences.
There's one last anecdote that I want to leave our listeners with, the story of the climb.
The wild horses monument. This is the metaphor for the entire writing life. It's beautiful.
Set the scene for us.
It's a blistering hot day in Washington state. Brooks and Hunter decide to hike up a steep, dusty hill to see this sculpture of wild horses at the top. It's not an easy hike. It's grueling. Brooks is sweating. He's out of breath. His knees hurt. And he's worried.
He's worried about rattlesnakes.
Constantly. He's scanning the ground, watching for snakes, thinking about the heat, thinking about how hard the climb is. He is miserable. He is entirely focused on the struggle, the problems.
And Hunter.
Hunter scampers to the top, effortless. He stands on the ridge, the wind blowing his hair, and he looks out over the Columbia River Gorge. And he shouts down, look, Papa, you can see the whole world.
Man.
Brooks realized he had been looking at the ground. He had been looking for snakes, for problems, for bad reviews, for plot holes. He forgot to look at the view.
You forgot the why.
He forgot the why. Writing is hard. It's a dusty uphill climb full of rattlesnakes. But if you don't stop to look at the view, if you don't appreciate that you get to create worlds for a living, then what is the point?
That is the perfect place to land. So looking at sometimes the magic works as a whole, what are the final takeaways? Brooks lists 3 traits that he believes every writer and really every creative person needs. He says they can't be taught.
Determination, instinct, and passion.
Determination.
Because it takes time. It's a long game. You might write a song of Lorelei and have to throw it away after a year of work. You need the grit to start over. Because there are no roadmaps. Not really. You have to trust your gut when the outline breaks, or when George Lucas tells you to do flashbacks, and you know in your heart it's wrong for the story.
Then in passion.
Because it has to matter. It has to come from a real place. He says, if you don't hear music in your words, you're thinking too much and feeling too little. If it's just a job, if it's just commerce, the reader will know. You have to feel the magic yourself before you can sell it to anyone else.
And he challenges us, the readers, to find our own dream time, to not just read about it, but do it.
He does. He says just for a few minutes, turn off the phone. Forget the grocery list. Lie back, close your eyes, and go somewhere you've never been. Gather some smoke. You might be surprised by what you find.
On comes the magic works.
And when it does, it's worth everything.
Well, I think I'm going to go find some classical music and take a drive. Thank you for walking us through this, and thank you to everyone listening. We will see you on the next deep dive.
Until next time.